for Southeast Louisiana Legal Services. She's held this post for the last decade and has been with SLLS for 30 years. She is a native of Shreveport, undergraduate degree from LSU, and law degree from Tulane University. We ask that only members of the press club and working media ask questions, but Laura has some insights that she is here to present. We thank her for being with us, and I'll turn the podium over to Laura Tuttle. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm feeling sort of short. Thank you so much for having me. I did not know this would be televised. I would have put on some makeup and done my hair. So you get what you get. So my name is Laura Tuttle, and I'm currently the director at Southeast Louisiana Legal Services. If you're not familiar with our organization, we're the largest nonprofit civil legal aid provider in the state of Louisiana. We provide free legal help to low-income and other vulnerable populations in 22 parishes in Southeast Louisiana. We have 7 offices. New Orleans is our largest office. Our second largest is here in Baton Rouge. We also have offices in Covington, Hammond, Homa, I always miss somebody, a small outreach office in Luling, and another office in Gretna. And we have about 175 staff. About 2/3 of our staff are attorneys. The other staff are paralegals, intake workers, and other folks that just help support our mission. And we're all about providing free civil legal services to vulnerable populations to help improve their lives and to help them achieve justice. And there's 3 main ways that we do this. We do this through what we're most well known for is handling individual cases. Like my friend from
Grandparents Raising Grandchildren.
Grandparents Raising Grandparents, my good friend, who we were just chatting earlier. They refer a lot of grandmothers to us and grandparents who need an array of legal services to help stabilize their lives and the grandchildren that they are raising. Everything from custody, domestic violence cases, family law. We do consumer debt cases. We do landlord-tenant. We do foreclosure prevention. We help people with disaster-related legal services. We assist, we're court-appointed to represent children in the foster care system. We handle expungements. We handle employment law. We handle benefits cases, Social Security, veterans benefits, unemployment cases. We have a statewide tax project. You kind of name it, and we do that on the civil side. What we don't do the slip and fall cases. That's not us. We don't do medical malpractice. We kind of leave what we call fee-generating cases primarily to the private bar. So we're really there to help the average person who's struggling with their day-to-day legal needs. And the issues are really overwhelming. The need is overwhelming. It's very common that someone will come to our offices for a certain kind of problem, and then we realize they actually have something else going on as well, because there's a lot of interrelated issues going on that contribute to folks having legal issues and are remaining in poverty because they can't resolve those issues. We're also really big believers, or I am since I became the director, in community-basing services as much as possible. So what I mean by that is, yes, we have these 7 offices, but we also want to reduce barriers that folks have in reaching our office and reaching our help. So that comes up in a variety of ways. We community-based services on-site with other partners as much as we can. So here in Baton Rouge, one of the ways that plays out is that we have a grant. We're mostly grant funded. I'll tell you a little about where our money comes from later. But we are primarily grant funded, and we have a grant that we received last year from the Veterans Administration. And so now we have put attorneys on site at the VA hospital or the VA clinic, south and north here in Baton Rouge, and also the women's clinic, and we're there 3 days a week on site at the VA in a model that's called a medical legal partnership model, where you're really trying to work closely with medical staff, help them identify legal issues that may be impacting the health, in this case of veterans, and then we are just right there on site because that's where the veterans are, so they can get their services in more of a one-stop shop setting. We just got an expansion of that grant. We just got our award last week, and we're going to be expanding that model in other parts of our service area, so we're very excited about that. Another thing that we do sort of on that medical legal partnership model here in Baton Rouge, we started it in Baton Rouge, and similarly we're expanding this one as well. So when I came on board as the director 10 years ago, I took over from my hero, Mark Moreau, who had been with the organization since it was founded in the late 60s, early 70s. I think Mark came in the early 70s. And unfortunately, Mark got cancer and ended up having to step down and passed away shortly thereafter. And when that happened, one of the things he had shared with me is that when he was getting his chemo treatment, he would talk to other patients. Many of them are type clientele that were going through a similar medical problem. And he would discover that they had all these unresolved legal issues. Well, if you are a lawyer, you know, everybody, oh, you're a lawyer, can you help me with this, can you help me with that? And so that's very common, and he started realizing that we needed to be doing more. So I had made that commitment way back when, and had tried a couple of things and couldn't get anything off the ground. And then about a year ago, one of our staff members, who was a cancer survivor, brought this issue back up. And it was almost like I was hearing the same conversation. And so we ended up approaching Mary Bird Perkins Cancer Treatment Hospitals about a different kind of medical legal partnership, because we didn't have a special grant to help us really get this going, but really felt called to try to get something started. And so what we ended up doing was developing a QR code. I have no idea what that really is, but somebody that knows technology did this for us. So we took our paper, what we call our legal needs screening tool, and turned it into a QR code. And now the social workers at the hospital, the patients themselves, a family member, can access that QR code on either a computer or on their cell phone, and can kind of go through the questions. It takes maybe like 3 minutes. And then if an issue pops up that we might be able to help them with, it gets emailed to our intake department, and then we can take the case from there. And it's allowed us to reach more hospitals. We started out with 4 in the greater Baton Rouge area. We just expanded to Houma. We're hoping to expand to the North Shore in the coming months. So we also partnered with the Cancer Association of Louisiana, who works with a number of hospitals outside of the system, of the Mary Bird Perkins system, and we're adding them as a provider too. So it's a different approach to medical legal partnerships through a referral process, but also using technology to really, you know, how do we reach folks? And so many people, getting them on their cell phones is an easier way to do it. Another special project that we have in the Baton Rouge area, we have tons of different projects, but another one that we're really proud of is our capital area homeless one-stop legal clinic. You know, homelessness, it's a huge issue all over the country, lack of affordable housing, and many of the other issues that contribute to homelessness. a big issue why some folks stay homeless is also they don't have a source of income. And what we found that, at least in the clients that we work with that are street homeless, probably about 50% of them have some kind of disability, but may be so impaired that penetrating the kind of Byzantine bureaucracy of the federal government Social Security disability process is a little hard going when you don't have an address and you don't have any kind of base of operations and you're maybe dealing with a lot of physical and or mental health or developmental limitations, sometimes all of them. So we started a project a number of years ago with funding from the Capital Area United Way, and then we were able to expand that with some funding from the Huey and Angelina Wilson Foundation. And we had several attorneys, 2 attorneys and a support staff member who spend 100% of their time on site at the Capital Area Homeless One Stop. They're all like saints over there. I mean, it's very difficult. It's very difficult work, sometimes very difficult conditions, but they get great results, and they're primarily helping folks either obtain disability benefits, sometimes expungements so that they can attempt to work if there's someone that might be able to go to work, and sometimes just trying to resolve other kinds of issues that get in the way of people being able to obtain housing. Last year, our project was awarded the Louisiana State Bar Association's Innovation Award. So we're very proud about that and the work they do. And in 2022, the Capital Area United Way presented us with what they call their ALICE Award, which stands for Asset Limited Income Constrained Yet Employed. It's really working with low-income families and providing different array of services. So we were really thrilled to get that a couple of years ago. Another big challenge we have in Louisiana, I mean, everybody in this room I'm sure knows many of the challenges we're facing here with the high poverty rates. We have the 5th highest rate of women killed by their intimate partner in the country. We've been in the top 5 for a number of years. We used to be like 1 and 2, but we've come down to be number 5, which is still not where you want to be. And we have many, many other socioeconomic stressors that make it difficult for people to thrive here. But the domestic violence issue post-COVID we have definitely seen both the lethality and the frequency increase since COVID. The other thing that has in some ways driven that up is also additional stressors from the hurricane. Hurricane Ida is the one I'm referring to. And so I'm sure that you guys have noticed it in the news yourselves. You know, it seems like every time you turn around, there's an incident happening, someone gets murdered, somebody's house gets burned down, something is ending up happening in the community, often due to domestic violence. And so that is like one of our top 2. It used to be the top 1 before COVID, but now housing has inched up to, we have more housing related cases than family law and domestic violence than we did before COVID. But it's still the number 2 issue that people seek our help for. And so some folks just call us out of the blue. Some folks are referred by the court, but we also work closely with both IRIS and the Capital Area Family Justice Center to provide integrated legal help to survivors that are first starting off with their services. So many times they may be helping them get in like an immediate protective order, but then the family or the victim may need legal help to prevent an eviction, or legal help to resolve custody or divorce issues, or to get some kind of support going on in the family. And those longer time issues are typically referred to our organization. So that is a really strong partnership that we think helps stabilize families. A little bit about, I'm going to turn to some of our disaster-related work, kind of near the end here, but just kind of going back a little bit about who we are. This is actually where our money comes from. People always seem to want to know this. So we've been around in one form or fashion for 50 years, a little more than 50 years actually. I've only been there 30. And when we started out, we really only had one source of funding at that time. And that was from the Federal Legal Services Corporation. They're our single largest funder. It comes from a congressional appropriation. And thankfully, there's very strong bipartisan support for the Legal Services Corporation and the work organizations like us do. So in June of 1974, President Nixon signed the Legal Services Corporation into being. So we just a smidge over 50 years right now. We now get about 50% of our funding from the Legal Services Corporation, who in turn gets that funding from Congress. And then our second largest funder is the Louisiana Bar Foundation, which is about 25% of our funding. So 75% of our funding comes from two sources. So if there's any instability, it gets a little worrisome, especially at the federal level, about what may happen to us. I can tell you, when the Trump administration came in, there was a proposal to totally zero out all funding for legal services in the United States of America. Thankfully, that didn't go anywhere because there's always been really strong bipartisan support. But you know, that is definitely something we'll be monitoring and looking at, and trying to really tell the story about how we make a difference in people's lives. Our impact in 2023, we helped individuals, 27,681 people in individual cases. Our direct economic impact, which we tracked the best that we can, we're not, you know, we're a bunch of lawyers, we're not statisticians, but we do record it in our case management system, and last year it was $26,461,001. And what the heck does that mean? That basically means, like, did we help a veteran maybe get veterans benefits, and what was the value of those benefits? Did we help a domestic violence survivor maybe get child support, and what was the value of that child support annualized over a year? We helped a disaster survivor maybe get recovery benefits by handling a succession, and we secured benefits but also preserved the equity in that home so that generational wealth was preserved. So it's any number of things. And the Louisiana Bar Foundation, our second largest funder, they do an economic impact study where they do hire a statistician to look at a bunch of metrics. We give them data, and they came back in their last report, which was done 2 years ago, and they said that for every dollar that was invested in legal services, there was $17.99 of social return on investment in the community. I don't know exactly what that means. I just know it really sounds good. You know, I think it's things like potential healthcare savings, law enforcement savings, other kind of societal savings, because we're able to get in and help stabilize families. We also reached about, I think it was 216,000 people through information. And you guys here hopefully are all about information. After COVID, when we were all kind of sitting around our living rooms, not sure what the heck was going to happen, we were trying to figure out a way to reach our clients. And that was kind of our aha moment, that we had to rely on technology a little more to reach people. So we shut down and went remote, I think, on March 16th. And then people's rents were due April 1st. And so many folks lost their jobs, particularly folks in this kind of industry, restaurants, tourism, lower wage jobs. So many people didn't know what to do. So we decided on March 31st, well, we're going to do a Facebook Live event. Never done that before, didn't quite know what it was, but you can just do this event and kind of push it out to the world, and they can interact with you through Facebook Live. And we sent it around to a few of our community partners who put it out there, and we released, I think it was that morning, probably around 9 or 10 o'clock, we put this out, having no idea what kind of response we would get, and we had over 4,200 people who, yes, oh my God, who popped into that. And so then we started doing a whole bunch more of these, and blog posts and informational pieces, and that first year, we had over 725,000 unique viewers looking at our information. And we ended up going on, I don't know who gets this stuff, but some of our attorneys ended up going on like CNN and Ari Shapiro show, I mean, all kinds of different things that was getting picked up. So we're now down to only about 215,000 or so last year, but it's still a pretty strong way to get information out. That is not necessarily, when we do legal representation, we have to go through a lot of checking to make sure people are eligible for our services. But informational type services, as long as you're not crossing the line and giving specific legal advice about someone's specific information, general information we can put out there. And so we have maintained that because sometimes folks just need to know a little bit about what might happen if I'm facing an eviction, what might happen, what's supposed to happen, what's the process. And we just kind of see that throughout the work that we do. And the last thing I have no idea if I'm on time now. The last thing I wanted to mention, we just got back, and Bill, who gave me this invitation today, we just got back about 2 weeks ago from our second, what we call a Disaster Law Collaboration Summit. And, another one of those big challenges we have in our state, you pretty much see this in the news every day too, is the insurance crisis. And there's a gajillion hurricanes that might be coming this summer, and other kinds of extreme weather events that are happening all over the place. So I'm actually from New Orleans, and that's where my office is. We have offices all over. But at the time Katrina hit, I was in the New Orleans office as a staff attorney doing housing work. And 100% of our staff were impacted. We lost about 40% of our staff after Katrina. But in the housing unit, I was the only one that was able to return. So I became the manager of myself, and that's a tough job. There's a lot to manage there. But quickly we were able to get some additional resources. That was any kind of climate weather event, huge impacts on housing, rental housing, home ownership, any kind of related type of, multifamily, single family, you name it, there's always a huge impact when disaster strikes. So that was the first time we'd ever experienced, and I think this country had really ever experienced, a major catastrophic event like that. Now it seems like every time you turn around, something like that is happening. It's, in the legal aid world, we talk about that this is like a growth industry for legal aid. Nobody knows what you mean by disaster law. I know in law school, they didn't teach us anything about FEMA and FEMA appeals and a lot of other things that come up in sort of the disaster world. So that was definitely something we had to learn, and it's something that we've really had to build up our work around. And two of the areas that we're seeing almost 20 years later, two of the things that we are seeing huge increases in need from our client population is all tied back to the long-term impacts of disaster. So one of them is successions, or probate, or resolving your grandmother's house issue, or whatever you might want to call it, getting legal title to home, heir property. Before Katrina, we did not do that work at all for our client population. So we had our wake-up call when we realized this is a huge unmet need in the community. And for whatever reason, folks kind of let things linger. Cost is a huge issue, family dynamics, and just like kind of it's not a problem till it's a problem. Like I'm living in grandmother's house or my mom and dad's house, and I've just never gone through those legal hoops. And then it becomes a problem when there's a disaster, because you either going to need some kind of proof of ownership or connection to the property to get FEMA benefits. You're going to have clear title to make a loan. You're going to, in many jurisdictions, our neighbors in St. John Parish, you're going to have a heck of a time getting a trailer, a new manufactured home on your property if you can't prove that you own it. They won't give you a permit. So there's all kinds of legal issues that we came to from a disaster recovery lens that we're now seeing this is work that we should have been doing all along. And so we just never stopped doing it. And right now, when we look at our statistics, comparing folks calling us pre-Hurricane Ida and now, there's about a 50% increase in people asking for legal help with successions so that they can try to get either that permit or those Restore Louisiana funds or whatever the potential source of funding may be to help them rebuild their homes. The other thing that we're sadly seeing a big jump, about 45% higher now than it was before Ida, is with foreclosures. So, or potential foreclosures. And this is related, not in all cases, but in many cases, it is due to the high cost of insurance, which is driving low-income people into potential foreclosure situations. So we are seeing folks that are either getting dropped by their insurance and they can't afford to get new insurance, or we're seeing folks that are getting forced placed with insurance that's quite a bit higher. Or we're seeing folks that are just getting into different kind of mortgage delinquency issues. So we do have a home ownership preservation unit that tries to help resolve some of these issues. Just like everybody else in this room, we're probably being very optimistic. You know, maybe this expanded funding that will go into the fortified group program, maybe that will ultimately help folks get their premiums reduced. But guess what you have to show to apply for that funding? That you own the house. And so low-income folks who, for whatever reason, may have been unable to afford a private attorney, didn't take care of an issue earlier in time, and now what might have been simple to resolve is really complicated because you're missing all these heirs and you can't find them, and so-and-so thinks this is a huge money situation, and it's really not. It's a modest home that you're just trying to keep in the family. All those things come into play when you're talking about why aren't people taking action sooner. And the Fortified Roof Program, you know, low-income people, unless there's some special procedures set up, they may very well not be able to kind of get in the door because of some of these succession issues. You know, when the other rebuilding programs are set up, like after a disaster, they usually have some set-asides for low to moderate income people. So hopefully that may be something that the state will take a look at so that some of our neediest families don't kind of get left out of that potential way to help them sustain their home. So I said a whole bunch of stuff. I don't know if y'all want to ask some questions, or I think I was only supposed to talk like 15 or 20 minutes, and I probably did more. Yes, sir.
You've been going on and on about legal issues, particularly for low income.
Yep.
One of the part-time jobs that an attorney can have is be a legislator. It'd be natural to hire him as a legislator, but the legislature is loaded with attorneys. So might someone come to the conclusion that our legal system is too complicated, and that's why now they're funding even more lawyers through you? Or is that a thought that you might agree with?
It is complicated. In Louisiana, it is a very complicated system. I'll give you an example. In some other states, they have uniform court forms. So let's just say that you're a modest income person, you don't qualify for legal aid, and you can't afford to go pay somebody privately, and you go to the courthouse and you ask for a form to try to handle something yourself. There's not going to be much there. There's a few forms that we've tried to get some consensus around, but that issue about it's kind of a complex system, that is very much true. Most legal matters I can only speak to Louisiana because I'm only licensed here. I've never practiced anywhere else. But in Louisiana, even for basic situations, to really kind of get through that process, you need an attorney. Although there's a lot of things that we try to do to help self-represented people, I've heard statistics that at least in some family court proceedings, it may be as high as like 75% of the people are unrepresented and don't have an attorney. So I don't know about the legislature, and I do know that there's a lot less attorneys in the legislature than there used to be. At least certainly at the federal level. I'm not as familiar with kind of where things stand at the state, but at the federal level there are a lot less. So I'm not sure what's going on with that, but it is a very complex system. It's hard for folks to navigate.
Could you lay out like 1, 2, 3 with hurricanes and storms approaching, as of the one that just hit, what people should have in a row? I know you mentioned it during but would you just kind of size it like 1, 2, 3? So
some of the things that you mean legal issues related to the hurricane?
Yeah, like that people need to be aware of. They don't document stuff to have in place.
So I think that there are some things folks can do to be a little more prepared before a hurricane strikes, and then there are also like the top kind of legal issues we see once there is a catastrophic hurricane or a presidentially declared disaster. So some of the things folks can do, if you know that you're living in air property, you'll want to try to get that resolved. Like, there are places to go. If you're lower income, you can call legal aid. We also partner with volunteer attorneys. If you're more middle income, you may want to call a private attorney, because it will really slow your process down, even to get your own insurance proceeds. We have this happen a lot. It could just be a surviving spouse situation, and the check comes. Let's just say the husband has died, and the check comes in both the deceased spouse's name and the living spouse's name, and you can't get a check. You can't get it cashed. So there's a lot of ways this pops up, no matter what your situation may be. The other thing that we encourage people to do is to think about doing a will, because sometimes If you don't do a will, the property is going to go a certain way by virtue of law under the civil code. But sometimes we hear this a lot. Oh, everybody knows grandma wants me to have the house. Okay, it don't go like that. You know, that verbal agreement is as good as the paper it's not written on. It's going to go by what the law says. So we do encourage folks that if they're thinking about doing things a certain way, think about doing a will. You can handwrite a will. Now that is one thing you can do, as long as you sign at the bottom of each page and date it. You can do that, and it, in most instances, will be valid. So you can go to an attorney, you can think about doing what they call a handwritten will. The other thing you want to do is make sure you know where all your paperwork is, all your insurance paperwork, you know, all those kind of things that you want to have with you. Another thing that people don't think about when a disaster is coming, if you have a custody agreement and there's a schedule for that child, a visitation schedule set out, you want to have that document with you when you evacuate, because many times if folks have to leave and they're not quite sure when they get back, then the child can sometimes wind up in a different city or a different state, and then you don't have the paperwork and the courthouse is closed, and it just becomes kind of a tricky situation. So whatever your legal papers may be, whether it's home ownership papers, whether it's your lease, you know, you just kind of want to have your go kit before you're leaving and trying to get those legal affairs in order before you go. The three most common things that we see, I might have to expand this to 5, but the most common legal issues we see after a presidentially declared disaster. We see FEMA appeals, or problems obtaining FEMA. That comes up very early on. We see landlord-tenant very early on in the beginning. You know, could be housing's at a premium, so if your house was slightly damaged, you know, things are leaking all over the place now and you can't get a landlord to fix it, we see those kind of issues. We also see the reverse, where there was a lot of significant damage and somebody's maybe evacuated and the landlord's like, you don't come get your stuff, I'm throwing it out on the street. I gotta get in the house and make repairs. So we see all kinds of different things. We see people that have lost their jobs because of the impact of a hurricane, and you know, now they're behind on their rent and they face an eviction. So those kind of issues usually come up near the beginning, the landlord-tenant. And then kind of more towards somewhat near the beginning and a little bit years after are these succession issues. Because the air property issues can come up when you're dealing with FEMA or your own insurance claim, but they can also come up almost 3 years later when there's funding that's come down to rebuild through long-term rebuilding programs. So those kind of have a longer fuse. The foreclosures, those come a little bit later. And then the other thing that sometimes is near the beginning and kind of throughout, like at least a 3 to 5 year kind of timeline, is contractor disputes. I don't call it contractor fraud all the time, because many times it's not necessarily a fraud situation. It could just be, I gave this company some money, I can't get them to come back, or they come back, they do some work, then they leave, or they took on too many things. So contractor disputes, I think those 5 things, FEMA, landlord-tenant, successions, foreclosure, contractor disputes, all of those things come up. And we've been doing this work now about 20 years, and every single disaster we've had, Hurricane Katrina, Rita, Ike, Gustav, Isaac, the 2016 floods in Baton Rouge, Ida, Laura, Delta, there's a lot of them. All of them follow the same pattern of the way the legal issues come up. What is changed over time is how quick or how long some of them last. But they all come up with that pretty predictable pattern. You're going to see these kind of legal issues first, and then this in the, you know, after maybe 3 to 6 months, and then after 6 months to 3 to 5 years sometimes, you will see these issues. So we're a little more prepared to deal with it now because we know what we're going to see and when we're going to see it.
And when you say succession,
Yes, ma'am.
explain that what that means is a title, an official title to your home or car.
So succession is, some places call it probate. In Louisiana, we call it successions. So someone passes away that used to own the property, or maybe they were a co-owner of the property. And what we see a lot of in our office are situations where it's a grandparent or a parent, and there's typically one family member, a child or a grandchild, who is living in the home after that person's death, trying to take care of it, trying to pay the taxes and fix it up. And then when disaster strikes, because they can't prove they owned it, if they didn't go through the legal steps to do so, it presents a barrier to recovery. And just to give you an example, that's not in the disaster context, but where we're seeing this come up a lot is in Donaldsonville, in Ascension Parish. So we got contacted about a year or so ago by the tax assessor's office. And they said, we're wondering if you can help our community. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's our service area, you know. But the challenge they were having was about 5-6 years ago, there was a law passed in the legislature that requires the Bureau of Vital Records, when someone dies, the death notification is now sent to the tax assessor's office. Apparently it took them a couple of years to really get things going because we're just now seeing this issue bubbling up all over the place in our service area. So what it ends up happening is, once they get that death notification at the tax assessor's office, they look and check their records. Well, does anybody own it? I don't see anybody's name on this property anymore. So I'm going to remove the homestead exemption. And when the homestead exemption gets removed, then the family owes a taxes, property taxes. And one of the ways that we can try to get the homestead exemption restored, if it's an heir property situation, we can do a succession. And sometimes you're able to get the other heirs to donate their interest or, you know, renounce their interest to that heir that's trying to take care of the property. These can get really complicated. Sometimes we're dealing with 12, 20, like a lot of heirs, sometimes more than that. For usually a very modest home, but it's usually a home that's been in the family for generations, and there's usually no mortgage even still due on it, that a family could potentially lose to a tax purchaser over less than $1,000. So when we got that call, we weren't sure of the magnitude of the problem, but the assessor told us we got like 300 homes in Donaldsonville, and it's mostly an African-American low-income community. What can we do? So if you go on their website right now, you'll see, you know, they have succession resources, and it basically tells folks you may want to contact an attorney, your exemption may have been removed. If you can't afford an attorney, you may want to contact Southeast Louisiana Legal Services, something along those lines. And they started, they sent postcards to all 300 of those families, which we could never have done for several reasons. But we've been partnering with them. We've been, you know, that particular community is probably about at least a 45-minute drive from our office. There's not good public transportation. So they volunteered their space for us to come, do a legal clinic if we need to. We did a training with the 23rd Judicial District Bar Association to try to get some volunteer attorneys to help us out. And in May, we met with a group of about a dozen ministers who are very interested in that.
I know time is the essence.
Thank you for keeping me.
Right, right. And, I have a very important question.
Yes, ma'am.
Most importantly, about the Southwest Louisiana.
Southeast.
Southeast Louisiana Legal Services. I don't know if I missed it. Did you say you have an office in Slidell?
We have an office in Covington, but we serve Slidell.
You serve Slidell out of the office in Covington? Okay, I need that information.
Okay.
I know one of the gentlemen here spoke earlier about the challenges we face in the legal system.
Yep.
It is serious.
Yes.
A lot of people cannot afford attorneys, and I'm talking about people that look like me.
Right.
They wind up just a mirage of things that cause them to become homeless.
Right.
Just because they could not afford an attorney. So my concern is that the challenge is, how are you servicing marginalized communities, and what are the statistics of that? Is there any kind of way we can find that out? And then I also want to make another suggestion. I'm a civil rights organization, and my resources are limited. Most people join up with my organization because they can't afford an attorney, or they just don't have anywhere else to turn.
Right.
And so I need to partner up with organizations like your legal service to basically, I guess, hands on deck, or a face-to-face, with these individuals that don't have access to your services, or don't know about your services, are really in dire need of your services.
Well, in terms of I don't know if this is really what you meant, but in terms of who we serve, we do analyze race, sex, household size, that kind of information. So I think last year about 70% of our clients across our 22 parishes were African American, majority female. But in New Orleans, for example, it's probably closer to 85% of our clients are African American, and predominantly women. One thing that we're working on, which we announced at this disaster conference, we are one of 2 legal aid, the large ones in the state, funded through the Legal Services Corporation, and our partners at Acadiana Legal Services cover 42 parishes. We cover 22, but we each have 50% of the state's poverty population within our respective service areas. So they purchased what they call justice buses to help get out into the community, because they have a much larger rural area than we have. And we just got through signing a shared usage agreement with them. So we'll be borrowing one of their buses on a schedule of up to a month at a time, and really trying to go out into the community in areas where we don't have physical offices, like Slidell or wherever it might be. So that's one thing that in September we hope to start that and get on a regular schedule and get out more into the community, because yes, some people can access through the technology, some people can call the hotline, some people can do an online application, but especially in some parts of our rural areas, that doesn't really work very well many times. So we really need to physically get out there more.
Yeah, and then people, they really don't trust organizations that they don't have relationships
That's right.
with, or they don't know information.
That's right.
So how would an organization, a civil rights organization like mine, partner up with your services?
I will give you my card, and we will get that going. So, yeah, and that is why when we got that request from the assessor's office in Donaldsonville, And we weren't getting quite as many calls as we expected. I mean, we got a lot of calls, but we thought we were just gonna be like overwhelmed. And that's why we said, let's go talk to the ministers. And it's very different when your minister says, you can trust these people who you've never met before, and they don't look like the community. So really digging more into those faith-based partnerships is another strategy that we want to rely on more.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, all right. You got it? Well, this was fun. Got some softballs. Oh, we have one more over here, yes.
My concern is this, you're talking about the law, the complications of the law. Why is it then that Louisiana still practices the voting law?
Well, I wish I could answer that question, but that is above my, that one's above my pay grade. Honestly, sir, I don't know. That is a question that there's a whole apparatus around that I literally can't answer that one.
Yes, ma'am. Just getting framed up right now. We'll just see what you think. All right. I'm gonna step to the side. You can just look at me for the whole interview. All right. Can you say your first and last name for me and spell it for me?
Belinda Parker Brown, Belinda Parker, Parker, Brown, Brown.
Yes, ma'am. Can you tell me? I heard you asking a lot of questions about talking about your organization and asking questions relating to this. Can you tell us what your organization is?
Yes, we are a civil constitutional human rights organization that focuses on the needs of our people in the community. Marginalized people mostly. The reason why we started this organization is because people were in dire need for legal services. You know, they could not afford attorneys. They didn't have anywhere else to turn. Families were being destroyed. You know, children were being taken away from them, and they didn't have anywhere to turn. So, and then at times there were very serious challenges with attorneys. They're paying money to lawyers and attorneys that would take their money, and sometimes they would never hear back from them. And people was just, you know, disturbed by it. They just feel like they couldn't trust, you know, the legal system, and they needed help.
Yes, ma'am. That's what your organization does.
Yes, so we help people, and we're volunteer-based, membership-based organization. And we help people help us with donations so that we can actually, you know, really help people that are in dire need for these type of services.
Yes, ma'am. Can you tell us about so how would y'all work with Southwest or your biggest reason for being here on behalf of the organization?
Yes, I found out about this by happenstance. I was glad I came, very happy that I came, and some of the things that I heard mentioned here today that was most important was trying to build a relationship with these type of services or organizations that are getting funding that can help our people that are in dire need for it. So my biggest concern is that what we can actually build some type of, what kind of relationship that we can build together to be able to reach and serve the people that really need this help.
And who are the people that really need those help, and in what area?
Right now, they do not have an office in Slidell. She said they have one in Covington. You know, most people that need these type of services are in rural areas, you know, minority areas, low-income areas, you know, children and grandparents that really need these services that don't have access to internet and, you know, whatever, you know, that they just don't know about them. So, you know, we want to be able to build a partner relationship so that we can bring these type of services to the people that really need it.
Yes, ma'am. And what's your position with the organization? I forgot to ask.
Yes, I'm the president and the CEO of the Louisiana United International.
And are y'all located in Baton Rouge?
We're based in Slidell.
Y'all based in Slidell.
And we focus on the whole state of Louisiana.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
So what does a project like, not a project, but like an organization like Southwest mean to like people in rural areas, or what could it mean?
Oh, it would be a breath of fresh air to come into these type of areas that that really need their services. And when she talked about, services like, expungement, there's so many young people that need those services because, they're down on their luck. They don't have resources to afford an attorney to get something as simple as a misdemeanor expunged from their record so that they can go and get a job or service their families, whatever it may be. Grandparents that, is trying to get custody over their grandchildren and they just don't have the resources to do that. They have all the means, but they don't have the money and they cannot afford an attorney.
And so an organization like Southwest can be the difference between, it can change a lot of people's lives. That's what we can say.
Absolutely. It would definitely, these services are so much needed because families are being destroyed. People are suffering and dire need of these type of services, and it would make a major, major difference on the lives of people that can benefit from these services.
Yes, ma'am. Anything else you would like to say?
Again, thank you for allowing me this opportunity. I'm happy that I was here today and learned a lot.
Yes, ma'am. And say your organization name one more time. I want to make sure I get it right.
I'm with Louisiana United International.
Mm-hmm.
We are a civil, constitutional, human rights organization that focus on the needs of people for legal services.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.